My insane mother-in-law physically assaulted and tried to stab me, so I'm ruining her life. My mother-in-law hated me from day one because I'm Asian. First meeting. Don't eat the dog joke. My boyfriend laughed. I should have left then. The racist jokes escalated. Called me yellow, did squinty eyes, mocked Chinese accents. Then she started making Tiananmen Square jokes, acting out the massacre in the most offensive way possible while my fiancé laughed along. I told him, either I never see her again, or we're done. He chose me. For a year, he visited his mother alone while our relationship flourished. Then he proposed. The wedding invitation argument started immediately. He wanted to invite her. I refused. Then he went behind my back and sent her an invitation anyway. She texted me, "Happy you invited me despite our misunderstandings." Never understood the problem with harmless jokes. I was furious. When my fiancé got home, I demanded we visit her to settle this once and for all. She hugged me like we were friends. I asked if she knew my fiancé sent the invitation without my permission. She was shocked. He'd lied to us both. For an hour, I explained why her jokes were racist and hurtful. She wouldn't budge. Just jokes, nothing more. My fiancé mostly took her side. I stood up. If this is your attitude, you're not invited. If you show up, I walk out. That's when she jumped on my back. I hit the floor hard, her fists pounding into me, screaming about her baby boy's wedding. My fiancé pulled her off, told her to calm down. The second he released her, she grabbed the steel fireplace poker and lunged at my arm. He caught her wrist just in time. I ran outside and called 911. Her security cameras captured everything. The attack, the poker, all of it. She was arrested for aggravated assault, facing 5 years. At home, my fiancé asked about my injuries. Then I gave him an ultimatum. Go no contact with your mother forever, or we're over. 24 hours to decide. That was yesterday. 4 hours left. This morning, his mother called from jail. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I know things got out of hand, but you need to know the truth about my son before you marry him. Check his laptop. Password is his birthday backwards. Look for the folder labeled insurance. You'll understand everything. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The folder wasn't about insurance. It was videos. Dozens of them. All of me. Sleeping, showering, changing. Dating back 2 years before we were even engaged. Hidden cameras. In my apartment. My hands shaking, I kept scrolling. Then I found another folder. Mom's house. Videos of his mother. In her bathroom. Her bedroom. Same hidden camera angles. Another folder. Sarah. His sister. Same thing. Another. Work. Female co-workers in the office bathroom. I was going to be sick. Then I found the folder that changed everything. Sales. Screenshots of conversations. Usernames. Payment confirmations. He'd been selling these videos online. Thousands of dollars. The most recent sale was last night. A video of me from 3 days ago, titled, "Asian Girlfriend Doesn't Know She's Being Watched." My phone rang. His mother again. This time I answered. "You looked," she said. "How did you?" I found the cameras 6 months ago. Confronted him. He begged me not to tell anyone. Said he'd get help. I believed him. Why didn't you tell me? He's my son. I thought I could fix him. But when he sold videos of his own sister last month, I realized he'd never stop. The racism was real. I'm not a good person, but I was trying to drive you away to protect you. The worse I was, the more determined you were to stay. Then last night, when you said you'd leave him, I panicked. You attacked me. I needed to get arrested. It was the only way to stop the wedding without revealing what he is. I couldn't let you marry him. The poker was never going to hit you. He knew that. He's seen me do that move in self-defense class. I telegraph it on purpose. He caught my wrist exactly where I wanted him to. My phone buzzed. Text from my fiancé. 2 hours left. Mom's lawyer called. Says you're pressing charges. Please reconsider. I love you. There's more, his mother continued. Check the external drive in his desk. Bottom drawer. I found it. Hundreds of folders. Each labeled with a woman's name and location. My folder was there. But it started 3 years ago. A full year before we met. He'd been stalking me before we randomly met at the gym. How many victims? I asked. At least 40 that I found. Some underage. We need to call the police. I already did. This morning. They're waiting for my signal. But I wanted you to know first. To get out safely. Where is he now? Check your tracking app. I looked. His phone showed him at my apartment building. But he'd texted from work. He's been spoofing his location, she said. There's probably a camera in your car. He watched you go to my house yesterday. Watched you come home alone. He knows where you are right now. A key turned in the lock. He's here, I whispered. The police are 3 minutes out. Get to the bathroom. Lock the door. I heard his voice. Honey, we need to talk. I've made my decision about Mom. His footsteps were coming toward the bedroom, toward the open laptop showing the videos. I choose you, he called out. I'll never speak to her again. He was at the bedroom door. I ran to the bathroom and locked the door behind me, my hands shaking so hard I could barely turn the lock. My heart was pounding, so loud I could hear it over his mother's voice on the phone telling me police were 90 seconds away. Through the door I heard him say, "Honey," in that same loving tone he'd used for 3 years, and it made my skin crawl, knowing what he really was. The footsteps stopped right outside the bedroom door. I pressed my back against the bathroom door and tried to breathe quietly even though my chest felt tight. His mother's voice came through the phone speaker, barely a whisper, telling me to stay quiet and stay put. The bathroom door handle rattled. He was trying to get in. His voice changed from concerned to confused as he asked if I was okay. I stayed completely silent, my phone pressed to my ear, listening to his mother whisper instructions through the line. The handle rattled again, harder this time. I heard him walk away from the bathroom, his footsteps heading back toward the bedroom. Then complete silence for 5 long seconds. My stomach dropped. He'd seen the laptop. He'd seen the open folders. He'd seen everything I discovered about what he'd been doing to me and all those other women. Then he shouted my name in panic. Not the loving voice anymore, but something raw and desperate. I heard things crashing in the bedroom, probably him trying to close the folders or shut down the laptop. The apartment door crashed open and police flooded in shouting commands. I heard scuffling and my fiancé yelling that this was a misunderstanding, that he could explain everything. His mother's voice came through the phone again, steady like she'd done this before, telling me to stay in the bathroom until an officer knocked and identified themselves. The sounds of the struggle in the living room got louder, furniture scraping across the floor, more shouting. Someone was reading him his rights. A female officer knocked on the bathroom door and showed her badge under the door gap, telling me it was safe to come out now. I unlocked the door with shaking hands and she guided me out into the hallway. We walked past the living room where my fiancé was face down on the floor in handcuffs, 2 officers standing over him. His eyes found mine and I saw an expression I couldn't read, maybe fear or maybe anger or maybe both. The female officer kept her hand on my shoulder, guiding me toward the kitchen. Detective Harris arrived within 10 minutes and sat with me at the kitchen table while other officers photographed everything and bagged the laptop as evidence. He was gentle but direct, explaining they'd been building a case for 2 weeks since the mother-in-law first contacted them with her concerns. I gave my statement while still in shock, describing the folders I found and the voicemail that led me to look. My voice sounded weird and distant like it belonged to someone else. Detective Harris confirmed they already had warrants for the apartment, his workplace, and his car based on evidence his mother provided. Officers were spreading out through the apartment now, taking pictures and putting little numbered markers next to things. One officer came out of the bedroom carrying the external drive in a plastic evidence bag. They found 4 hidden cameras in my apartment during the search, including one in the bathroom where I'd just been hiding. The officer who discovered the bathroom camera looked at me with such pity that I had to look away. The violation hit me in waves, knowing he'd been watching me in there, recording me in my most private moments. My fiancé was taken away in a police car while I was still giving my statement, and the last thing I heard him shout was that his mother set him up, and I needed to understand this wasn't what it looked like. Detective Harris asked if I had somewhere safe to stay tonight because this was now a crime scene. I called my best friend Rachel, who said she'd be there right away. She arrived within the hour, her face going pale when I explained what happened in broken sentences. She packed a bag for me while officers continued processing the apartment, grabbing clothes and toiletries without asking what I needed because I couldn't think straight enough to tell her. Rachel kept looking at me like I might break, her hands moving fast through my drawers and closet. We pulled out of the parking lot, and Rachel kept glancing at me in the passenger seat while I stared straight ahead, unable to process anything that had just happened. My phone rang and I saw his mother's name flash on the screen. I answered without thinking and put it on speaker. She asked if I was safe and if the police had arrested him. Her voice sounded different now, tired and sad instead of angry or mean like all the times before. I told her yes, they took him away in handcuffs about 20 minutes ago. She went quiet for a second and then said she was sorry for not telling me sooner, that she found the first camera 6 months ago hidden in her own bathroom and confronted him about it. He cried and begged her not to call the police, promised he would stop and get help from a therapist. She believed him because he was her son and she wanted to think he could change. The racism was real, she admitted that. But after she found out what he was doing, she tried to make me hate her enough to leave him. Every awful joke and cruel comment was supposed to drive me away before I married him. But I stayed anyway, got more stubborn about it, and she realized her plan was making things worse. Rachel pulled into her apartment complex parking lot and turned off the car, but neither of us moved. His mother kept talking, explaining how 3 weeks ago she found new videos on a different external drive, footage of his sister in her apartment that was dated from last month. That was when she knew he had never stopped, never gotten help, just gotten better at hiding it. She said she spent 2 weeks trying to figure out how to stop the wedding without destroying her relationship with both her kids. The attack yesterday was planned, she told me, every single part of it calculated to get herself arrested so she could warn me from jail where he could not stop her. I felt sick listening to this, realizing I was a pawn in some twisted family drama, while also being grateful she did something even if it was 6 months too late. Rachel helped me inside her apartment with my hastily packed bag, and I collapsed on her couch. Everything hit me at once, and I started crying. Not the quiet kind, but the ugly sobbing where you cannot breathe and your whole body shakes. Rachel sat next to me and pulled me against her shoulder while I fell apart. 3 years of my life was a lie. Every sweet moment, every romantic gesture, every time he said he loved me was just him playing a role while he watched me through hidden cameras. He recorded me sleeping, showering, changing clothes, doing everything a person does when they think they are alone and safe. Then he sold those videos to strangers online, turned my most private moments into products with gross titles about me not knowing I was watched. The violation felt worse than anything physical, knowing that pieces of my life were out there forever, that people I would never meet had seen me in ways nobody should see another person. Rachel did not say anything, just held me and let me cry until I had nothing left. I barely slept that night, jumping at every sound and checking Rachel's apartment for cameras even though I knew that was crazy. The next morning, Detective Harris called asking me to come to the police station for a longer interview, now that I had some time to process everything. He said they contacted other possible victims based on files they took from my apartment, and my case was part of something much bigger than just me and my ex. Rachel drove me to the station and waited in the lobby while an officer led me to a small interview room with a table and 3 chairs. Detective Harris came in a few minutes later with another man in a dark suit who introduced himself as Yong Hu from the FBI. Agent Hu specialized in cybercrimes and online bad stuff, and he explained that my ex was part of an online group that traded and sold hidden camera videos. The FBI had been watching this network for months, trying to identify all the members and victims before making arrests. Agent Hu opened a laptop and turned it toward me, showing me screenshots of chat logs from some website I had never heard of. My ex's username was there, along with dozens of messages where he talked about surveillance equipment and camera placement techniques. He bragged about footage quality and complained about victims who were too careful, made jokes about women not knowing they were being recorded. Reading his words about me like I was a thing instead of a person made my stomach turn. I had to ask Agent Hu to stop 3 different times during the interview because I thought I might throw up. He was patient about it, giving me water and waiting until I was ready to continue. The evidence kept going. Page after page of conversations where my ex discussed me and other women like we were products in a catalog. Detective Harris took over and told me more about what they found. His mother discovered cameras in her house 6 months ago when she was cleaning and noticed a weird black dot on her bathroom mirror frame. She confronted my ex and he broke down, admitted everything, said he had a problem and needed help. She made him promise to delete all the videos and stop recording people, and he agreed to see a therapist. She checked his laptop a few times over the next months and did not find anything, so she thought he was getting better. But 3 weeks ago, she was at his sister's apartment helping her move furniture and saw the same kind of black dot on a shelf in the bedroom. She knew immediately what it was. When she got home, she tore apart my ex's office and found a second external drive hidden inside a fake book on his shelf. The drive had new videos of his sister from the past month, proof he never stopped and just got sneakier about hiding evidence. Agent Hu pulled up more files and I saw location data, maps with red dots showing places my ex had been over the past 2 years. He explained that my ex started following me 14 months before we met at the gym, tracking my routines and learning my schedule. The data showed him at my favorite coffee shop, my grocery store, the park where I jogged every Saturday morning. He engineered our whole meeting, showed up at my gym at the exact time I always worked out, and positioned himself near the equipment I always used. Our relationship was never random or natural. It was planned from the start like some kind of sick project. I felt my hands shaking looking at all those red dots, realizing he had been watching me for over a year before I even knew his name. Detective Harris stood up and opened the door, gesturing to someone in the hallway. A woman around my age walked in, thin with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. He introduced her as Phoebe Leach, another victim who my ex recorded at their shared workplace 2 years ago. Phoebe sat down across from me and explained she found out about the videos last year when the company did a security review and discovered hidden cameras in the women's bathroom. My ex worked in IT, so he had access to install equipment without anyone questioning him. She had been in therapy for over a year dealing with what happened and offered to share what helped her get through the legal stuff and recovery process. Her voice was steady, but I could see pain in her eyes when she talked about it. Phoebe said the hardest part for her was not knowing what was real anymore. Every conversation at work, every friendly interaction, every normal day felt like it might have been performance art for his entertainment. She did not know which memories were genuine and which ones he had staged or manipulated to get better footage. The constant second-guessing made her feel crazy, wondering if her whole life was fake. She still struggled with trusting people, and had this thing where she checked every room for cameras before she could relax. Hearing her describe exactly what I was feeling made me realize I was not losing my mind, that these reactions were normal for what we went through. She told me the hypervigilance got better with time and therapy, but never completely went away. A woman in a gray suit walked in and introduced herself as Millicent Whitehead, the prosecutor assigned to the case. She sat down next to Agent Hu and spread out papers on the table, explaining the charges they were filing against my ex. Multiple counts of surveillance without consent, distribution of private images, stalking, wire fraud from selling the videos online. Millicent said she was confident about getting a conviction because the evidence was overwhelming, but she warned me the legal process would take months, and I would have to relive everything over and over again. Court hearings, depositions, possibly a trial if he did not take a plea deal. Every time I would have to go through what happened, describe the violation, look at evidence that proved how he watched me. She was honest about how hard it would be, but promised her office would do everything possible to support me through it. The next morning, Millicent called and said she needed me to come to the station for evidence review. I knew what that meant, but hearing the words still made my stomach drop. Rachel drove me there and sat in the waiting room while I followed Millicent down a long hallway to a small room with a computer and monitor. She explained they needed me to identify myself in the videos for the prosecution, to confirm these were taken without my knowledge. The first video loaded, and there I was sleeping in my bed, completely unaware of the camera pointed at me. My hands started shaking so badly I had to sit on them. Millicent asked if I needed a break, but I shook my head because stopping would make it worse. Video after video played showing me in my apartment, in my bathroom, changing clothes, showering, living my life while he watched and recorded everything. Each one had a date stamp, and I realized he had hundreds of hours of footage spanning 2 full years. The worst part was seeing myself smile and laugh in some of them, looking happy and in love, not knowing I was performing for an audience. Millicent sat next to me the entire time, her presence solid and calm while I fell apart. She handed me tissues without comment when tears started running down my face. By the time we finished, I had identified myself in 47 different videos, and I felt like I might throw up. Agent Hu came in after Millicent left and sat down across from me with a thick folder. He said they had identified 15 other victims from the files my ex kept. His sister Sarah was one of them. 4 women from his workplace. 2 ex-girlfriends from before me. 6 other women he apparently targeted just to create content for selling. The numbers kept growing, and I realized I was never special to him at all. I was just another product in his collection, another Asian girl he could market to buyers with specific preferences. Agent Hu showed me spreadsheets tracking his sales, organized by victim ethnicity and age and body type. My category had the highest prices because of demand for Asian women. Reading those cold calculations made me understand I was never a person to him, just inventory. 3 days later, the victim advocate called and said someone wanted to talk to me. His sister Sarah. She was struggling with guilt for not realizing what her brother was doing and wanted to meet if I was willing. I agreed mostly because I was curious about the family that created someone capable of this. We met at a coffee shop near the police station, and Sarah looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes like she had not slept in days. She started crying before she even sat down, apologizing over and over for not knowing, for not protecting me or the other victims. I told her it was not her fault, but she shook her head. She said she lived in the same house growing up and never saw any signs of what he would become. He was her big brother who taught her to ride a bike and helped with homework and seemed completely normal. Sarah explained their mother had always been controlling and often racist, but she genuinely believed her son was a good person until she found videos of Sarah in her own apartment 6 months ago. Their mother confronted him and he cried and promised to get help and stop. She believed him because he was her son, and she wanted to fix him instead of destroying his life. But the racism was real, Sarah confirmed. Their mother really did hate me for being Asian, really did think I was not good enough for her son. Finding out what he was doing did not erase her racist views. It just added horror on top of existing prejudice. Sarah said it created this impossible tangle where their mother was both a bigot who hurt me and a parent who ultimately tried to protect me from her son. She did not know how to process having a mother who was 2 opposite things at once. I asked Sarah if she thought the attack on me was really staged like her mother claimed. Sarah nodded and said their mother took self-defense classes for years and knew exactly how to make movements look dangerous without causing actual harm. The whole scene was theater designed to get herself arrested, so she could expose him without directly betraying her son. She needed to be in custody, needed the separation and the authority of police involvement to finally tell the truth she had been hiding. The poker move was something their mother practiced in class, a specific technique where you telegraph the strike so your opponent can block it easily. My ex knew that move because he had watched their mother practice it dozens of times. He caught her wrist exactly where she wanted him to, exactly where she trained him to respond. The security cameras captured everything just like their mother planned. She orchestrated her own arrest to save me from marrying her son. The realization hit me like cold water. I was part of an elaborate performance orchestrated by his mother, while she simultaneously subjected me to racist abuse for over a year. She used me as a pawn in her family drama, let me suffer through her slurs and mockery and cruelty, all while knowing her son was violating me in ways I could not even imagine. She watched me get hurt over and over and did nothing until she decided the timing was right for her plan. I felt angry in a completely new way. Not just at what my ex did, but at being manipulated by his mother even in her attempt to help me. She was both my abuser and my savior, and I had no idea how to hold those 2 truths in my head at the same time. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand, tears still running down her face. She said she understood the anger, that she felt it too, that their mother's choices were complicated and terrible and impossible to forgive, even when they ultimately protected us. Rachel helped me find a new apartment the following week in a neighborhood across town where my ex never tracked me. The landlord was a middle-aged woman who listened to my situation without judgment and said she understood completely. She installed extra locks on all the doors and windows before I even signed the lease. She gave me permission to check every room for cameras using the detection equipment the police had loaned me. I spent 2 hours scanning every corner, every outlet, every smoke detector, every possible hiding spot. Rachel stayed with me the whole time, patient and quiet while I obsessively checked and rechecked each room. When I finally felt safe enough to sign the lease, the landlord handed me 3 sets of keys and told me I was the only person who would ever have access to this apartment. No maintenance entry without my explicit permission. No exceptions. Miguel Acosta, the forensic specialist from the FBI, spent an entire day teaching me how to detect hidden cameras and secure my digital life. He brought equipment to my new apartment, including lens detectors that reflected light off camera lenses, radio frequency scanners that picked up wireless signals, and thermal cameras that showed heat signatures from electronic devices. He taught me to check smoke detectors, wall outlets, air vents, picture frames, and any object positioned to face private areas. He showed me how to secure my phone and computer, how to check for spyware and tracking software, how to use encryption and secure passwords. He explained privacy practices like covering my laptop camera, being aware of my surroundings, trusting my instincts when something felt wrong. By the end of the day, I had tools and knowledge that made me feel slightly less powerless, slightly more in control of my own safety. My first night alone in the new apartment, I barely slept. I checked the locks at midnight, then again at 1, then 2, then 3. I scanned for cameras every hour using the equipment Miguel left me, walking through each room with the detector even though I had already checked everything twice during the day. I could not shake the feeling of being watched, could not turn off the awareness that cameras could be anywhere, and I might miss them. Every small sound made me jump. Every shadow looked suspicious. The hypervigilance was exhausting, but I could not make it stop. My brain would not accept that I was safe even though I had checked everything multiple times. Around 4 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and sat on the couch with all the lights on, scanning the room again and again until sunrise. Detective Harris called 2 days later with news that made everything feel worse. They found evidence my ex had been planning to propose for over a year, meaning our entire engagement was calculated and staged. He researched ring styles I liked by tracking my Pinterest boards and online shopping history. He planned the proposal location based on my Instagram posts about places I wanted to visit. He orchestrated every romantic moment as part of his surveillance operation, creating scenes he knew would film well and generate good content for buyers. The detective said they found documents on his computer outlining the proposal plan month by month, including notes about camera angles and lighting conditions. Our engagement was not a spontaneous expression of love. It was a business decision designed to create more valuable content and keep me invested in the relationship long enough to maximize his profits. Jacqueline called me 3 days after the arrest to connect me with a therapist. She gave me a name, Helen Sato, and said this woman worked with people like me. People who had their privacy stolen. People who didn't know what was real anymore. I made the appointment for the following week because I couldn't handle talking about it any sooner. When I walked into Dr. Sato's office, she didn't make me sit on a couch or ask me how I felt. She just looked at me and said my body was doing exactly what it should do after what happened. The checking for cameras, the jumping at sounds, the feeling of being watched even when I knew I was alone. She called it hypervigilance and explained my brain was trying to protect me from another violation by staying alert to every possible threat. She said trust issues were normal when someone you loved turned out to be documenting your existence without permission. She made it sound less like I was broken and more like I was responding correctly to an impossible situation. I cried anyway because hearing that I wasn't crazy didn't make the symptoms go away. My second session with Dr. Sato broke me completely. I tried to explain how I couldn't tell which memories were real, whether any moment we shared actually meant something to him, or if I was always just content. Just another video to sell. Dr. Sato let me sob for 10 minutes before she said something that shifted everything. She told me my feelings were real even if his weren't. That I was allowed to grieve the relationship I thought I had, the person I thought he was, the future I believed we would build together. She said the violation wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and I needed to mourn both losses separately. I left that session feeling worse but somehow clearer, like she had given me permission to hurt about all of it, instead of just being angry. Millicent called the next day with news about bail. The judge denied it after they found spyware on my phone that tracked my location in real time. He'd been monitoring where I went, who I saw, how long I stayed places. The prosecutor argued he was a continued threat, especially after he tried to access the tracking app from jail using a phone another inmate smuggled in for him. Millicent said the judge took one look at that evidence and ruled he would stay locked up until trial. I felt relief and terror at the same time because it meant he'd been watching my every move right up until his arrest, and even from jail he was trying to keep tabs on me. I had to get a new phone the same day. New number, new email, new social media accounts. I spent hours rebuilding my digital life from scratch, sending messages to friends and family explaining why I disappeared from their contacts. Most people understood after I gave them a brief explanation about security concerns. Some pushed for details I couldn't give yet. The process exhausted me because every account I created felt like admitting he'd invaded every corner of my existence. I couldn't keep anything from before. Everything was contaminated by his surveillance. Phoebe reached out a week later through Jacqueline to invite me to a support group. She said it met twice a month and focused specifically on surveillance victims. I almost said no because the idea of sitting in a room talking about this with strangers felt impossible. But Phoebe promised I didn't have to share anything. I could just listen. So I went. Walking into that room and seeing 8 other women who knew exactly what I was going through changed something in me. I wasn't alone anymore. These women understood the specific violation of learning someone recorded your private moments. They understood the shame and anger and confusion all mixed together. For the first time since finding those videos, I felt less isolated in this nightmare. At the support group, I met women who were years into recovery. One woman named Lisa talked about how she still checked for cameras, but not as often as she used to. She said it took 3 years of therapy before she could sleep through the night without getting up to scan her bedroom. Another woman described finally being able to be intimate with her new partner after 4 years of work. Their honest accounts of ongoing struggles mixed with genuine healing gave me hope that I wouldn't feel this broken forever. They didn't promise it would be easy or quick, but they showed me it was possible to rebuild a life after someone stole your privacy. I started believing I might survive this. Victor Novak, his defense attorney, contacted Jacqueline 2 weeks after the arrest. He wanted to know if I would consider writing a victim impact statement for sentencing negotiations. Millicent called me immediately after Jacqueline forwarded the request. She explained that Victor was probably trying to figure out whether I would push for maximum penalties or accept a plea deal. She said defense attorneys did this to gauge how angry the victims were, how much fight they had left in them. Millicent told me I didn't have to decide anything yet, but I should start thinking about what I wanted to say if this went to sentencing. I told her I'd think about it. I started writing my impact statement that night. I wrote and rewrote it dozens of times over the next few weeks, trying to find words that captured how he stole my sense of safety, my ability to trust, my privacy, and my agency in my own life story. Nothing felt adequate. How do you explain to a judge what it does to a person to learn someone documented your existence without consent? How do you describe the violation of discovering the man you loved was selling videos of you showering to strangers online? I filled pages with attempts and threw most of them away, because they either sounded too angry or not angry enough. Dr. Sato helped me work through drafts in our sessions, encouraging me to focus on specific impacts rather than general feelings. Agent Hu called with an update about the investigation. They had dismantled the entire online network my ex was part of. The operation resulted in arrests across 4 states, dozens of men who traded and sold hidden camera footage. My case became the breakthrough that exposed all of them, because the evidence from his computers led investigators to the forum where they operated. Agent Hu said I should feel proud that my willingness to come forward protected other women. I told him I was glad others would be safe, but I hated being the catalyst for this. I didn't want to be the reason this network got exposed. I just wanted my life back. Detective Harris showed up at my apartment 3 days later with news that made everything more complicated. They found evidence that his mother knew about the surveillance for 8 months, not 6 like she claimed. The timeline suggested she might have accessed some videos herself before confronting him. Detective Harris showed me metadata from file access logs that indicated someone using her computer opened folders containing videos of me at least 4 times over a 2-month period. She'd been watching me get violated for weeks before she decided to take action. I felt betrayed all over again by someone who claimed she was trying to protect me. I sat at Sarah's kitchen table 3 days later, coffee going cold between my hands while she explained what their mother told her about those 8 months. Sarah kept looking down at her own cup, not meeting my eyes, like she felt guilty for even having this conversation. She said their mother found the first camera in her bathroom back in March, confronted him that same night, and he broke down crying about being sick and needing help. He promised he'd delete everything, get therapy, stop completely. Their mother believed him because she wanted to believe him, because admitting what her son really was meant admitting she'd raised a monster. Sarah's voice cracked when she described how their mother checked his computer weekly for months, found nothing, thought he'd actually stopped. Then last month, their mother discovered he'd just gotten better at hiding things, found the new external drive with fresh videos, including ones of Sarah from 2 weeks earlier. That's when their mother realized he'd never stop, that therapy was just another lie, that she'd let him keep hurting people while she played pretend about his recovery. Sarah finally looked up at me with red eyes and said their mother spent those months choosing her son over his victims, over me, over her own daughter, and that choice came way too late to matter. I met with Millicent the next morning at her office downtown. She had the case files spread across her desk, dozens of folders with evidence tags, and she walked me through the legal situation with their mother. Millicent explained that technically his mother could face charges for failing to report the crimes once she knew about them, maybe even charges for accessing the videos herself based on those file logs. but the prosecution was holding off on any charges against her because her cooperation had been critical to building the case, because without her initial report and the evidence she preserved, they might not have caught him at all. Millicent said it was a practical calculation, that sometimes you had to let smaller crimes go to prosecute bigger ones, that justice wasn't always clean or fair. I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp, because this meant his mother got to walk away mostly free while I had to live with what she'd let happen to me for 8 months. I told Millicent it felt wrong, letting someone off because they were useful, making deals with people who watched you get violated and did nothing. Millicent just nodded and said she understood my anger, but this was how the system worked, and would I rather have a guaranteed conviction of him or pursue charges against his mother that might weaken the whole case? The preliminary hearing was scheduled for early November, 6 weeks after his arrest. I woke up that morning feeling sick, knowing I'd have to see him for the first time since the police dragged him out of my apartment in handcuffs. Rachel drove me to the courthouse because my hands were shaking too hard to hold the steering wheel. We sat in the hallway outside the courtroom with Millicent going over what to expect, but I couldn't focus on her words because I kept watching the door waiting for them to bring him in. When they finally let him through in his orange jumpsuit with chains on his wrists and ankles, he looked different somehow. Smaller, like he'd shrunk in jail. His hair was longer and messy, his face pale, his shoulders hunched forward in a way I'd never seen before. Our eyes met across the hallway for just a second, and he mouthed something that looked like sorry, his lips forming the word without sound, like that word could possibly mean anything after what he did. I looked away fast, my stomach turning, because even seeing his face made me feel watched all over again. Inside the courtroom, I sat in the front row behind Millicent, while the judge reviewed the charges. The prosecutor presented evidence in careful detail, each charge read aloud with dates and descriptions that made my skin crawl. A digital forensics expert named Rivera testified about the surveillance operation, explaining how they'd found cameras in 7 different locations, including my apartment, his mother's house, his sister's apartment, and his workplace. Rivera described the sophistication of the setup, the wireless systems, the cloud storage, the encrypted files, all of it planned and maintained over 4 years. He showed the court a chart listing 15 different victims, their names redacted but their locations and timeframes clearly marked. The expert talked about terabytes of video data, thousands of individual files, a systematic operation that required technical knowledge and constant attention. The clinical language, all those technical terms and legal phrases, couldn't hide what this really was. Predatory behavior, calculated violation, him turning 15 women into products he could watch and sell whenever he wanted. I sat there listening to Rivera describe the scope of the crimes and realized I was just one small piece of something much bigger and more horrible than I'd understood. Victor Novak stood up when it was the defense's turn, his voice smooth and practiced as he addressed the judge. He painted his client as someone suffering from serious mental health issues, someone who needed treatment and therapy rather than prison time. Victor talked about addiction, about compulsive behaviors, about his client's troubled childhood and undiagnosed conditions that drove him to these actions. He made it sound like my ex was sick rather than criminal, like what he did was a symptom of illness instead of a choice. Victor argued that prison wouldn't help anyone, that his client needed psychiatric care in a controlled facility, that punishment without treatment would just create more victims down the road. I watched Millicent's face get harder with every word Victor spoke. When it was her turn to respond, she stood up with a folder full of documents and systematically destroyed his entire argument. Millicent presented evidence of the planning that went into the surveillance operation, the research he'd done on camera technology, the spreadsheets tracking which victims generated the most profit. She showed the court chat logs where he discussed surveillance techniques with other predators, proving he knew exactly what he was doing and that it was illegal. She presented his sales records showing he'd made over $60,000 selling videos, demonstrating clear profit motive rather than compulsive behavior. Millicent's voice was sharp and clear as she argued that this wasn't mental illness. This was calculated criminal enterprise, and her client's awareness of the illegality was proven by his elaborate efforts to hide his activities. The judge took less than 10 minutes to make his ruling. He found sufficient evidence to proceed to trial on all charges and denied the defense motion to suppress evidence from the apartment search. The judge's voice was firm as he explained that the search warrant was properly obtained and executed, that all evidence was legally seized, and that the defendant would remain in custody without bail until trial. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt 2 things at once that didn't fit together. Vindicated because the case was moving forward, because a judge had looked at the evidence and agreed this was serious enough for trial, but also exhausted at the thought of months more of this process. More hearings, more evidence review, more seeing his face and hearing the details of what he did. Rachel put her arm around my shoulders as we walked to her car, and I leaned into her without saying anything because there weren't words for how drained I felt. His mother's letter arrived a week later, delivered through her attorney to Millicent's office. Millicent called me before forwarding it, asking if I wanted to read it or if she should just file it away. I said send it because I needed to know what possible explanation she thought she had. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten on legal pad paper, her words rambling and circling back on themselves like she'd written and rewritten her thoughts multiple times. She tried to justify the racism as a protective strategy, saying she thought if she was horrible enough I'd leave him before the wedding, before I got trapped in his life permanently. She acknowledged that her actions caused real harm regardless of her intentions, that racist abuse was racist abuse no matter what motivated it. The letter described her therapy sessions where she was trying to understand why she'd prioritized her son's reputation over my safety for so long, why she'd let 8 months pass while he kept recording and selling videos of me and others. She wrote about the guilt of knowing she could have stopped him sooner, about the weight of choosing wrong over and over again until the choice became unbearable. There was no request for forgiveness in the letter, no expectation that I'd respond or feel differently about her. Just a statement that she was working on being better, on understanding what she'd done, on accepting that some damage couldn't be repaired. I kept the letter in my desk drawer, folded back into its envelope, unable to throw it away but also unable to respond. Dr. Sato and I spent 2 sessions working through my feelings about it. The way I hated his mother for the racism and the inaction, but also felt grateful she'd ultimately stopped the wedding. The cognitive dissonance of those 2 feelings existing together was hard to process. Hating someone who saved me, being grateful to someone who abused me. Dr. Sato helped me understand that both things could be true at once, that people were complicated and situations were messy, that I didn't have to resolve those conflicting feelings into one clean emotion. She said maybe the letter wasn't asking for resolution anyway. Maybe it was just his mother's attempt to be honest about what she'd done and why, and I could accept that honesty without forgiving the actions. Sarah started texting me more often after the hearing, checking in about how I was doing, sharing updates about her own therapy progress. We met for coffee again 2 weeks after the hearing, and she told me she'd cut off contact with their mother completely. Sarah said she couldn't forgive the months of inaction, couldn't accept that their mother had known what he was doing to her own daughter, and still waited weeks before acting. We sat in that coffee shop comparing notes about our complicated grief over losing family members who were still technically alive, who we could theoretically contact but chose not to. Sarah talked about missing the mother she thought she had while hating the one who actually existed. I understood that feeling completely, the way you could mourn someone who was never real while they walked around still breathing. We became friends through that shared understanding, meeting weekly to support each other through the ongoing legal process, and the weird specific trauma of family betrayal mixed with surveillance violation. Phoebe called me on a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks after the hearing. She asked if I wanted to meet up because she had an idea she wanted to run by me. We met at a park near her apartment and walked the trails while she explained her plan. Phoebe wanted to start a nonprofit focused on surveillance victim advocacy and hidden camera detection education. She'd been researching it for months, looking at gaps in existing services, talking to other victims about what they wished they'd known. Phoebe said she wanted to teach people how to check for cameras in their homes and workplaces, how to secure their digital lives, how to navigate the legal system if they discovered they'd been recorded. She asked if I wanted to help her build it, if I wanted to turn what happened to us into something that protected other people. The idea appealed to me immediately, giving purpose to the violation, making something useful out of the nightmare. I told Phoebe yes before she'd even finished explaining all the details because I needed this. Needed to feel like the horrible thing that happened to me could prevent horrible things from happening to someone else. I spent the next 3 weeks buried in research about nonprofits, reading articles about similar organizations and taking notes on mission statements that felt right. The work gave me something concrete to focus on instead of thinking about the trial coming up in 2 months. I filled notebook after notebook with ideas about what services we could offer and how to reach people who needed help. Every time my mind started wandering to the videos or the cameras or what he did to me, I forced myself to read another case study or draft another paragraph about our goals. Phoebe and I met twice a week at coffee shops to compare notes and plan out the structure. She handled the legal paperwork while I researched detection equipment and training programs. The planning made me feel less powerless, like I was taking back some control over a situation that had stolen all my choices. I could build something useful from this nightmare, turn the worst thing that ever happened to me into protection for other people. Agent Hu called on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing vendor quotes for camera detection devices. His voice sounded tired when he told me they'd found more evidence during their investigation of the online network. My ex had sold footage to buyers in countries where revenge porn laws didn't exist, places where those videos would circulate forever without any legal way to stop them. The permanence of it hit me like a physical blow. Strangers in countries I'd never visit would always have access to videos of me sleeping, showering, existing in my most private moments. I sat on my kitchen floor after the call ended, staring at the wall and trying to process that there was literally nothing I could do about those videos. They were out there forever. People I would never meet had watched me without my knowledge or permission, and that violation would never end. Dr. Sato spent our next session helping me work through the reality that I couldn't control what happened to those videos. She said I could only control how I responded to that lack of control. We practiced acceptance techniques where I acknowledged the truth without letting it destroy me. The videos exist. Strangers have seen them. That will never change. But I'm still here. I'm still building a life. Those videos don't define who I am, even though they captured moments of my life. We did grounding exercises for when the intrusive thoughts about unknown viewers became too much, focusing on what I could feel and touch and control in the present moment. Dr. Sato reminded me that healing didn't mean forgetting or pretending it didn't happen. It meant learning to carry the weight of what happened without letting it crush me completely. 3 months after his arrest, Millicent called to say Victor Novak had approached her with a plea deal. My ex would plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a sentence of 15 years with possibility of parole after 10. She asked what I wanted to do, whether I wanted to accept guaranteed conviction or risk trial for a potentially longer sentence. I told her I needed to talk to the other victims before deciding anything. This affected all 15 of us, not just me, and we should make the choice together. I spent the next week meeting with all 14 other victims to discuss the plea offer. We met in a conference room Millicent arranged, sitting around a long table while we debated what felt like an impossible decision. We were split almost down the middle. Phoebe argued that going to trial meant reliving everything publicly, having our private violations discussed in open court where anyone could attend. She said guaranteed conviction was worth avoiding that additional trauma. Sarah insisted he deserved maximum punishment, that 15 years wasn't enough for what he did to 15 women over 4 years. 3 other women agreed with Sarah, saying we should push for trial and hope for 20 or 25 years. The rest of us sat somewhere in the middle, torn between wanting justice and wanting this whole process to be over. We talked for 3 hours, going around the table sharing our thoughts and fears. By the end, we still hadn't reached agreement, but we decided to think about it individually for a few more days. I spent those days thinking about what I actually wanted from this process. Did I want revenge or closure? Did I want him to suffer? Or did I just want to move forward with my life? After 4 days of thinking it through with Dr. Sato's help, I called Millicent and told her I supported accepting the plea deal if all victims agreed, and if he admitted to every crime without minimizing or blaming mental illness. I wanted him to say out loud exactly what he did and why it was wrong. I wanted him to acknowledge that he knew it was violation, that he understood the harm he caused, that he chose to do it anyway for money and power. Millicent said she could make that a condition of the plea agreement. Over the next week, the other victims came to similar conclusions. Even Sarah eventually agreed after talking with her own therapist about what she needed from the process. The plea hearing got scheduled for 2 weeks out. I spent that time preparing my victim impact statement with Dr. Sato's help. I wrote draft after draft, trying to find words that captured the ongoing harm without making me sound completely destroyed. I wanted to be clear about how he stole my ability to feel safe in intimate relationships, how I still checked for cameras constantly, how I couldn't trust my own memories of our time together. But I also wanted to show that he didn't break me completely, that I was building something meaningful from the wreckage. Dr. Sato helped me find the balance between honesty about the damage and hope for continued healing. On the day of the plea hearing, all 15 victims showed up to present our impact statements. The courtroom felt smaller than I expected, more ordinary. We sat together in the front rows while the judge reviewed the plea agreement. When it was time for victim statements, I stood up and walked to the podium with my notes. I spoke about losing my ability to feel safe in intimate relationships, about the hypervigilance that made me check every room for cameras, about the violation of learning my entire relationship was surveillance theater. I talked about how he turned my most private moments into products for sale, how strangers across the world had access to footage of me that I could never reclaim. My voice stayed steady, even though my hands shook. When I finished and sat down, Phoebe went next, then Sarah, then the other 12 victims. We each told our piece of the story he created. Then it was his turn to allocute to each crime. He stood at his own podium and read from a prepared statement in a voice that sounded flat and emotionless. He described installing cameras in my apartment, in his sister's home, in workplace bathrooms. He listed the dates he uploaded videos to various websites. He confirmed that he sold the footage for profit, that he knew it was wrong, that he chose to do it anyway. The lack of emotion in his voice was somehow worse than tears would have been. If he'd cried or shown remorse, it might have felt like we'd been real people to him at some point. But his flat tone confirmed what I already knew. We were never real to him. We were content, products, things to be recorded and sold. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison, mandatory sex offender registration for life, lifetime prohibition on owning or using any surveillance equipment, and restitution payments to all victims. She called his crimes a calculated violation of trust and privacy that caused lasting harm to 15 women. When she finished reading the sentence, I felt relief mixed with this strange emptiness. Justice was achieved in the technical sense. He would go to prison. He would be punished. But nothing felt resolved. The videos still existed. The violation was still permanent. Walking out of the courthouse with the other victims, I realized that legal justice and actual healing were two completely different things. I walk past his mother outside the courthouse without looking at her. She stands near the steps trying to catch my eye, but I keep moving toward Rachel's car. Her voice calls my name once, then stops. The distance between us feels like the only boundary I can control right now, and Dr. Sato told me that's perfectly okay. Some relationships stay broken forever, and forcing forgiveness before I'm ready would only hurt my healing. The mother-in-law who spent years making racist jokes, and then orchestrated an assault to save me, exists in a space I can't process yet. Maybe I never will, and that has to be enough. The local news runs a series on hidden camera crimes 3 days after the sentencing. They don't name victims, but the details feel too specific. A young Asian woman, her ex-fiancé, surveillance spanning years. I watched the segment with my stomach turning, convinced everyone will figure out it's me. The anchor discusses the growing problem of hidden cameras in intimate spaces, showing stock footage of tiny devices hidden in smoke detectors and phone chargers. My phone buzzes with texts from people I haven't spoken to in months, all asking if I saw the news story. Jacqueline comes over that evening and we practice responses. Keep it vague. Don't confirm or deny. Redirect to the importance of the issue rather than personal details. She role-plays different scenarios while I try not to throw up. A coworker asks directly the next day. I use Jacqueline's script about supporting victims without identifying myself and the coworker backs off. But I see the recognition in her eyes, the way she looks at me differently now. 4 months after his arrest, Phoebe and I host our first workshop. We rented a community center room that fits 30 people, but only 20 show up. I'm relieved and disappointed at the same time. The presentation covers basic detection techniques, showing different types of hidden cameras and where they're commonly placed. Phoebe demonstrates using a lens detector while I explain radio frequency scanners. 3 women approach us afterward with stories that make my chest tight. One found a camera in her bathroom after our presentation, installed by her landlord. Another discovered her roommate had been recording her for months. The third just wants to learn how to check her new boyfriend's apartment without seeming paranoid. We exchange contact information and promise to help however we can. Walking to my car afterward, Phoebe squeezes my hand and says, "This is just the beginning. The violation that nearly destroyed us is becoming something that protects other people." Sarah calls 2 weeks later sounding exhausted. Her mother is moving to another state to live with relatives. The community knows what her son did, and she can't handle the stares and whispers anymore. Sarah feels guilty for being relieved. She loves her mother despite everything, but having her nearby feels like carrying a weight that never gets lighter. I understand that specific type of grief, mourning someone who's still alive but fundamentally changed. We meet for coffee and don't talk about her mother or brother for the first 20 minutes. Just normal conversation about work and weather and plans for the weekend. Then Sarah admits she's scared her mother will try to contact her from wherever she moves, wanting to rebuild their relationship. I tell her she gets to decide what contact looks like. Protecting herself isn't betrayal. Sarah cries into her latte while other customers pretend not to notice. 5 months after the arrest, my friend introduces me to someone at a dinner party. He knows my history because she warned him ahead of time. Our first date involves me checking his apartment for cameras. He hands me his lens detector without making a joke or acting like I'm being unreasonable. I scan every room while he makes tea in the kitchen, giving me space to feel safe. Finding nothing doesn't make the anxiety disappear, but his patience helps. We sit on his couch talking about normal things, movies and travel and family. When he reaches for my hand, he asks first. The small gesture of consent makes my eyes water. Dating after surveillance feels like relearning how to trust my own judgment about people. He texts me afterwards saying he had a good time and understands if I need to move slowly. I screenshot the message and send it to Dr. Sato with 3 heart emojis. Dr. Sato points out during our next session that I've gone hours without checking for cameras. The hypervigilance that made me scan every room multiple times daily is decreasing. I'm sleeping better in my secured apartment, sometimes making it through entire nights without waking up convinced someone is watching. The progress feels tiny and huge at the same time. She shows me a chart tracking my anxiety levels over 6 months, and the downward trend surprises me. Healing isn't linear, but it's real. Measured in small moments of feeling safe. Measured in mornings I wake up without immediately searching for hidden devices. Measured in the ability to be present with another person without constant fear. Dr. Sato reminds me that trauma changes people, but it doesn't have to define them forever. I'm becoming someone new, someone shaped by what happened, but not destroyed by it. The nonprofit grows faster than Phoebe and I imagined. Universities request workshops for their students. Workplaces want training for their security teams. Community centers ask us to present at safety fairs. We hire 2 part-time staff members to handle scheduling and outreach. Every workshop brings more people who need help, more stories of cameras found and danger avoided. The work exhausts me and fills me with purpose at the same time. Helping other people protect themselves gives meaning to what I survived. Phoebe and I meet weekly to review cases and plan upcoming events. She tells me about a woman who found cameras in 3 different apartments over 2 years, always installed by different men she dated. The pattern suggests something organized, maybe connected to the network my ex was part of. We pass the information to Detective Harris, who promises to investigate. A letter arrives from a woman named Jennifer who attended our second workshop. She thanks us for teaching her to detect the camera her ex-boyfriend hidden in her bedroom smoke detector. She got out safely because of what we showed her, moved to a new apartment and filed a police report. Her ex was arrested last week. Jennifer writes that she almost didn't come to the workshop because she felt paranoid for suspecting him. Our presentation validated her instincts and gave her tools to confirm what she already sensed. The gratitude in her words reminds me why this work matters. Every person we help makes the violation I experienced slightly less pointless. The videos of me still exist somewhere online, permanent and beyond my control. But helping Jennifer and others like her creates something permanent too. Something protective rather than destructive. 6 months after his sentencing, Sarah gets married. I attend the wedding and meet extended family who treat me with surprising warmth. Aunts and uncles and cousins apologize for what their relative did, expressing shock and shame. The normality of celebrating with people connected to him feels strange and healing at the same time. Sarah's grandmother hugs me and whispers that she's glad I got away. The reception involves dancing and cake and toasts that don't mention the absent family members. Sarah's new husband knows everything and chose her anyway, which gives me hope for my own future relationships. Driving home that night, I realize I spent hours with his family without feeling afraid or angry. The connection to him through them is becoming less sharp, less consuming. His mother sends a final letter on the anniversary of his arrest. The envelope arrives with no return address, forwarded through her lawyer. She apologizes without excuse, acknowledging that her racism and her inaction both caused real harm that sorry can't fix. She doesn't ask for forgiveness or request contact, just states she's working on being better, attending therapy, and educating herself about the damage her words and choices created. The letter feels different from her previous attempts at explanation. No justification, no defense, just acknowledgement of harm and commitment to change. I appreciate the lack of expectation, the understanding that I might never want contact with her. Dr. Sato asks if I want to respond. I tell her maybe someday, but not now. The letter goes in a box with other documents from this period of my life, preserved but not actively examined. I wake up on Tuesday morning and realize I haven't thought about him once since Friday. The apartment feels different somehow. Lighter maybe. Like the air itself weighs less than it did last week. I make coffee without checking the smoke detector for cameras, without scanning the corners of the ceiling, without that constant crawling sensation between my shoulder blades. The coffee tastes better when I'm not wondering if someone's watching me drink it. I see Helen later that afternoon for our regular session, and tell her about the week, about going full days without the intrusive thoughts, about sleeping through the night without waking up to search for blinking red lights. She smiles in that careful way therapists do when they're genuinely pleased, but don't want to make it about them. She calls it a milestone, evidence of genuine healing rather than just coping. The trauma isn't gone, she reminds me, and probably never will be completely, but it's no longer sitting in the center of my life taking up all the space. It's moved to the edges where I can function around it instead of through it. I leave her office feeling something close to proud, which is a weird emotion to have about basic things like not being paranoid, but I'll take it. A year after everything happened, I'm sitting in the nonprofit office Phoebe and I share, reviewing applications for our next workshop series. The organization grew faster than either of us expected, expanding from local workshops to online training modules that reach people across the country. My phone buzzes with a text from James asking what time I'll be home for dinner. James knows everything about what I survived, sat through my explanation on our third date when I needed him to understand why I was so careful, so suspicious, so slow to trust. He respects my boundaries without making me feel broken, checks in without hovering, gives me space without abandoning me. We're building something healthy and real, something that doesn't involve hidden cameras or lies or performance. I'm reclaiming my sense of safety one careful day at a time, learning to trust my instincts again, to believe that not everyone is watching, that privacy can actually exist. I'm not the person I was before all this happened, before I discovered what my fiancé really was. I'm more cautious now, more aware of technology and surveillance, more vigilant about protecting my space and my body and my choices. But I'm also stronger in ways I never needed to be before, more purposeful about the work I do, more committed to protecting other people from experiencing what I survived. The cameras stole something from me that I'll never fully get back, but they also showed me what I'm capable of when everything falls apart. I'm still here, still fighting, still helping others find their way out of the dark.